don't walk off. I pressed too many times, sorry. Sorry. We're going to go right from project abstract, which again should be, I hope it's almost like a summary to you of some of the points we made yesterday when we looked at aims. And we're going to jump from that into the background and significance. And back to back with that, we're going to look at preliminary studies. And then I'll give you a break before research design and methods. But we're going to look at background and significance first. So I'm sorry, Erin.
Oh, it's okay.
I did it twice, so. And when we start, let me say by way of, starting, when we look at background significance, and again, every grant you write, whether it's, excuse me, whether it's for the NIH, whether it's for any of your professional societies, absolutely, if you're a grad student looking at any of these grad student applications, if you're a postdoc, any of these applications are always going to ask for a section that is equivalent to background and significance. Sometimes it's called something slightly different, review of the literature, something like that, but you will always see this section. So it's an important section, and I would say it's probably the most misunderstood section of a grant application. And it should be an easy section, but sometimes people don't understand what's the point of this section. And the most common mistake that we see in this section, people say, well, I don't even understand why every grant has a background section. Obviously, at this point in my career, I can write a review of the literature. It's a very common thing to say. Every person in this room can write a review of the literature. Absolutely, there's no question. But that's not what this section is. And if you approach it as a review of the literature, that's a big mistake. So can a poor background significance, can it cost the grant? I don't know if it can cost the grant, but it can certainly weaken you in this competitive climate. So we're going to talk about what to put in there. Promise not to do that again. So we're going to take this idea, take hold of this idea, and we are going to try and sell this idea, the importance of this idea, the significance of this research, what's new, what's novel. All that's going to come into play in the background and significance. So, again, I always want to start with the directions so we can see as our point of departure. So the directions for the NIH background section, straightforward. They say we want the background leading to your proposed research. And then the second bullet is critically evaluate existing knowledge. Oh, I only pressed it once. I swear it's not me. Oh, I don't know why I went to the end like that, sorry.
So this number of pages is based on the new R1 12 page.
It's not based on the 12 page, because if you apply now, you have to go with the 25-page limit. With the 25-page limit. The 12-page limit will come into play in 2010, but we don't know exactly when yet. We know that it's 2010, and that's all that the NIH has published on that. So this page count is based, if you are applying either, for the upcoming deadline, I think a number of you are looking at the June deadline. Once it comes time for the last deadline of 09, the October deadline, we may be looking at changes because that would be reviewed in 2010, but we don't know that yet.
So you don't know the new page recommendations per section?
Hasn't been published. We've all been, eagerly awaiting that because the 12 pages is so short. We've all been eagerly anticipating that. All we know is that it's going to be 12 pages. And is that even etched in stone? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You know, I have a flash drive, you know, with, yeah, so give me a second to put the flash drive up that I. Background significance. Yeah. Yeah, let's see how that works. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't want to say here, I'm gonna just move back and forth.
Okay.
I can tell, yeah, that this computer is having a crabby day. So, we said that these are the NIH directions, and the directions start with background leading up to your proposed research, and then a bulleted point that we're gonna go back to in a moment because it creates a lot of confusion, and the bulleted point says critically evaluate existing knowledge, so we're gonna return to that. It says identify the gaps your project will fill. When we read that, identify the gaps, the questions, controversies, contradictions in the literature that your project will address, the importance and public health relevance. If your aims are achieved, how will scientific knowledge or clinical practice be advanced? And the effect of your studies on the concepts, methods, technologies, services, that drive your particular field. Currently, if you're applying again in this current year, you're looking at 2 to 3 pages for this section. So, a couple of points about that, by the way. Oftentimes, when people are writing, and I know a number of you, again, how many of you are looking at an NIH grant in the upcoming year? Very common mistake, and it is so understandable. When you look at this section, it says 2 to 3 pages, and oftentimes a new investigator, a junior investigator, someone who hasn't yet competed for funding, instead of doing 2 to 3 pages, they'll look at this section and they'll do 5 or 6 pages. And I'll often say, well, gee, you know, the recommendations, the guidelines are 2 to 3 pages. You came in at 6. You know, how come you did that? And people say, well, you know, Wendy, because my preliminary studies are thin and I want to fill out the application. So don't do that. You're just wasting your time. It looks like you don't follow directions. Nobody's fooled by this. I would stick to the guidelines. Can you go over and drip onto the 4th page? Sure you can, no problem. I wouldn't go much beyond that. 2 to 3 pages. Use your time profitably. So I said that one of the bullets that causes the most problem is the one that says critically evaluate existing knowledge. It's funny, the best part of my job is I get to work with a lot of scientists. The scientists tend to be, in general, just a very nice group of people to work with, scientists and physicians. It's also a very literal-minded group. Scientists are very, you know, you give them a direction that says critically evaluate existing knowledge. It's no surprise they critically evaluate the existing knowledge. Well, here's what the NIH really means by that. And I really want you to be careful and do a heads up. I use this graphic deliberately about hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Speak no evil. When you are critically evaluating existing knowledge, you really need to do this in a very appropriate fashion. We don't just criticize the work that's out there in a blind fashion. We use what I call appropriate language. When I say appropriate, we use respectful language. The limitations of so-and-so study were as follows.